Imagine being a single mother, unemployed and looking for an opportunity to make a living. This could be the description of any woman's life around the world, right? But the woman we're talking about today could be considered a powerful wizard, for she overcame various adversities and became one of the most famous writers on the planet, selling more than 500 million books. Since we're not sure if she used any spells to achieve these numbers, today in our episode of Hero's Journey, we're gonna tell the real story of this globally recognized writer and author of one of the most successful book series of all time, Harry Potter. Although she's now a celebrated author and bestseller in several countries, J.K. Rowling's life was not always like this. Having been rejected by various publishers at the start of her career, Joanne has some valuable and inspiring lessons to show us. She was born in Bristol, England on July 31, 1965. She lived with her parents and her young sister, Diane, from whom she has her first memories of playing together. From childhood, it was evident that Joanne had a fertile imagination, creating fantasy stories and writing most of the time. Interestingly, one of the sisters' favorite pastimes was precisely playing with magic tricks. Thankfully, none of them tried to cast an Avada Kedavra when they argued. But curiously, at just 6 years old, Joanne wrote her first book about a rabbit, and the book received the title of The Rabbit. Yeah, quite creative, huh? Her passion for writing was reinforced by her parents' interest in reading. They had various books scattered around the house. By the time she was 11 years old, she had already written a second story about 7 cursed diamonds belonging to 7 different people. But where did she get the inspiration to create these stories? Rowling has said in interviews that her childhood was not as happy as it could have been, mainly after her mother's illness and the troubled relationship with her father. In fact, this is how the character Hermione was created, according to the author, inspired by her own story when she was just 11 years old.
It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
Years later, Joanne attended Yate Comprehensive School, and at 18 moved to study French and classical languages at the University of Exeter, which proved to be quite useful a few years later to create the spells of the wizarding world.
Expecto Patronum!
Potato!
Spelliarmus!
Expecto Patronum!
After her graduation, she worked for some time at Amnesty International. The author says this was one of the most inspiring experiences of her life, as she read letters written in secret every day by people living under dictatorial regimes, aiming to show the world the reality. After living an ordinary life, working and trying to pay her bills like almost everyone around her, she had an idea that would radically impact her life and the lives of millions of people. Rowling says the idea of Harry Potter came up in 1990 on a train journey from Manchester to London, whose destination station was King's Cross. The story of a young boy studying at a magic school simply appeared in her head.
The idea came out of nowhere. I could see Harry very clearly, this scrawny little boy. And it was the most physical rush of excitement. I'd never felt that excited about anything to do with writing. I'd never had an idea that gave me such a physical response.
The detail was that the author had no paper on hand and had to think about the idea the entire trip until she arrived at her apartment in London, and immediately began to write so as not to forget that epiphany. But the story had to be briefly interrupted by a sad event in the author's life. That same year, she moved to Portugal for a tragic reason. Her mother died due to multiple sclerosis. Despite the unforeseen events, Joanne took her manuscripts and continued the stories. As she could not dedicate herself fully to her writing career, she had to work as an English teacher to support herself. During this hard time, she managed to persevere and finalize the first 3 chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. J.K. says that her mother's death and the divorce she faced during the same period deeply affected her, added to the fact that soon after she also ended up unemployed for a while and had to be supported by unemployment insurance. Such negative events hit the author so hard that she was diagnosed with depression.
It's just characterized for me by a numbness, a coldness, and an inability to believe that you will feel happy again or that you could feel light-hearted again. It's just all the colour drained out of life, really.
But as everything happens for a greater purpose, the same description of her depression was later used by J.K. Rowling to characterize the Dementors, frightening creatures that suck the life out of other people. Now you can understand why the Dementors made everyone scared and sad in the movies, right? It's basically a metaphor for depression. But our hero bounced back. After months alternating between spending the day taking care of her daughter at home and writing in pubs, Joanne finally finished the first manuscript of the saga. It was then that she decided to send the first 3 chapters to some publishers. The author shared that she received a lot of no's, and according to her, some of these rejections were quite rude, which somewhat discouraged her. When asked in interviews how she overcame all this, she said, "I had nothing to lose, and sometimes that's what gives you the courage to try." That's quite a lesson, isn't it? Now imagine how those publishers must have felt years later upon discovering they lost the opportunity to launch the biggest saga in the history of world literature. Well, after several rejections, Joanne finally got a positive response from Bloomsbury, a small British publisher. The literary agent from the publisher wanted to read the rest of the text. According to her, it was the best letter she had ever received in her life. And we can say this agent hit the jackpot, right? Actually, it wasn't quite like that. A funny fact is that J.K. Rowling owes part of her success to the daughter of the owner of that publisher. The girl read the first 3 chapters and immediately wanted to know the rest of the story and convinced her father to contact the author. Even so, the editors didn't believe it would be a big hit. Barry Cunningham, Joanne's editor, even advised her to find a regular job, as it would be impossible to make a living selling children's books. But finally, in 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was published, to the joy of the legion of wizards and witches that emerged after that magical year. Interestingly, the author had to add the K to her number on Cunningham's suggestion, who said it would be difficult to convince male readers to buy a magic book written by a woman. Therefore, instead of Joanne Rowling, the covers were credited to J.K. Rowling. The K stands for Kathleen, in honor of her paternal grandmother's name. It was useful to disguise her real gender identity. The fact is that the book the editors thought would not be a bestseller sold worldwide more than 120 million copies. Indeed, the Harry Potter saga was a huge sales success. It broke records and became a global phenomenon with more than 500 million copies in over 50 languages. All 7 books in the saga are on the list of the world's 100 bestsellers. The books were turned into 8 movies that are worldwide box office records. After a journey full of challenges, we can say that J.K. Rowling is a woman who achieved success and recognition thanks to her determination and resilience. According to Forbes, the author's fortune is currently estimated at $650 million. Indeed, the value could be even higher if Joanne didn't dedicate millions to social causes every year. It's estimated that she has donated about $150 million over the years. Besides her charity work and books related to the world of Harry Potter, the author continues to live her personal legend and keeps writing other types of novels. She's published a few other books: The Cage of Vacancy, The Cuckoo's Calling, The Silkworm, and Career of Evil. But these books were signed under the pseudonym of Robert Galbraith. That's right, she didn't want to use her real name to get a real and sincere evaluation of her work. She shares that it was a very enriching experience to publish freely under a pseudonym without external expectations and to receive an honest feedback. She has written on Twitter that the first editor to reject Harry Potter was equally rude in rejecting The Cuckoo's Calling. J.K. often posts pictures of some of her current rejections to encourage writers to keep trying. If even J.K., who's already a celebrated author, gets her work rejected, imagine novice or unknown writers. However, shortly after the release of her first book, her identity was discovered. Either way, she made sure to go through the whole process of sending her books to the publishers, receiving rejections, and reviews in newspapers and magazines. Currently, the author lives in Edinburgh with her husband Neil Murray and their 3 children. So tell me, did you enjoy learning about J.K. Rowling's story? Inspiring, isn't it? Well, if you'd like to know more about the journey of ordinary people who have achieved great feats in their life, then leave a like and subscribe to our channel to receive the next episodes of The Hero's Journey. That's all for today. I'll see you next time.